Hello class. In this video we're going to be working through the activities in Chapter 7 with Mookie the Beagle Concierge. In this chapter, the business has decided to start selling products and managing inventory. We'll begin by adding new inventory items to the products and services list. We'll also make some edits to the chart of accounts so QBO can properly track inventory assets, sales income, and cost of goods sold. Next, we'll walk through the vendor side of the process, creating purchasing orders, entering bills when items are received, and then paying those bills. Then we'll switch to the customer side, where we'll create invoices, receive payments on those invoices, and then, depending on how we're paid, record the appropriate deposits into our bank. Along the way, we'll also set up sales tax for the company and practice applying it to transactions. By the end of this chapter, you'll see how QuickBooks ties everything together from purchasing and paying vendors to selling and collecting from customers while keeping inventory and our account balances updated behind the scenes. Before we get started though, let's take a quick look at section 7.2 of our textbook and take a look at how QBO organizes the inventory process. So when we buy and resell products, we have to keep track of both sides, what we purchase from our vendors and what we sell to our customers. This section of the book lays out the order of transactions that we'll use in QBO. On the vendor side, we got them right here, we'll start by creating a purchase order. Then we'll enter the bill when the items are received from that purchase order. And finally, we'll pay the bill. On the customer side, we'll create an invoice, followed by recording the customer's payment on that invoice. And then depending on how we're paid, we will subsequently deposit those funds into the company's bank account. So essentially it's a flow: purchase order, bill, pay bills. And on the customer side, invoice, receive payment, and maybe make a deposit, once again depending on how we were paid. This sequence is the backbone of how QBO handles inventory, and you'll see us work through these steps in the upcoming activities with Mookie the Beagle. And one last thing on this page, we got a note here about what we have to do first. We need to verify that inventory tracking is turned on in QBO. So it tells us how to get there, and that's what I'm going to start with. Back into QBO, going to click on the gear icon, our settings, going to go to account and settings. Then we're going to go to the sales tab. And in this product and services group of settings, we need to make sure that track quantity and price rate is turned on. Now you can see that it is turned on in my system. If I needed to turn it on, I would hit this pencil and I would flip the switch and then save. But it's already turned on, so I am good to go. One last thing to mention here though, you'll notice that the inventory valuation method can be selected here. Now the text doesn't actually ask us to select a method, but you can see you can choose from FIFO and moving average. If you don't make a selection here, the system is going to default to FIFO, just so you're aware. So the first thing we're going to do after making sure that our setting is tracking inventory properly is we are going to revisit our products and services list. You can get there in several ways. I'm going to use the search to find it. So I'm just going to type in products and services up top here. And I found it. Now, taking a look at our list here, we can see that all of the items in the list currently are services that Mookie the Beagle provides to its customers. When we create new items to be placed in this list, we have to first decide which category does the item fall into. Now, I've touched on this previously, but if we're doing work for a customer, we are providing a service to them, and we charge them for that service, we'd select service. If we're selling a product and we want to track quantities of that product, we use an inventory item. If we're selling a product but we don't track the quantities, maybe because it's too costly to track them or they're trivial dollar amounts, there's some reasons why we might not, but that's what we do as a non-inventory item if we sell it but we don't track the quantities. And finally, we use a bundle if it's a combination of products and or services. So in this chapter, we're going to be adding several inventory items, and that's what I'm going to do right now. Select inventory item, and the first inventory item that we're going to start selling is going to be some dog food. So we have a name here. I'm going to type it in: Mookie the Beagle Bon Appetit Organic Dog Food. We're seeing a reminder of that inventory method here, and like I said, if we don't choose one, the system's going to be using FIFO by default. If we had a SKU number for the product, we would enter it, but we aren't provided with one. And we are going to put this in a category, but the categories that we have right now are service categories. So we're going to create a new category today, and we're going to call it pet food supplies. And I'll save that category. So now we have a section about inventory information, and the first thing we have to respond to is the initial quantity on hand. We're not starting with any products, so we're going to say that's 0. And then we have to tell the system as of what date was this quantity determined, and we're going to set it up as of the beginning of January 2025. The reorder point, this is the quantity in which the system will basically give you an alert if you get down to that quantity or below with your product. So it'll give you a reminder that, hey, you should reorder. And we're going to set that for a quantity of 1. And then as far as the inventory asset account, so we're going to have an asset in the chart of accounts. It's going to track the inventory that we have available for resale, the quantity that we have at different points in time, and we're just going to go with the default of inventory asset for that. In the sales section for the description, we're just going to use the product's name here again, Mookie the Beagle Bon Appetit Organic Dog Food. The price that we're going to charge for 1 unit of organic dog food is $140. That's expensive dog food. For the income account, we're going to use this default account, sales of product income. In the purchasing section of the form, we're going to enter a description. We're just going to use the product name again there. The purchase cost, we can get the dog food from our supplier for $50 per unit. The expense account that will be charged when we sell some of the product will be going to cost of goods sold. We'll leave that as default. And then the preferred vendor, we have a new vendor to add to the system. So I'm going to click on this drop down. I'm going to add new, and we just have a name for the business, Only the Best Dog Food. Then I'll save the vendor record, and now it's showing up in the inventory item. And for right now, I'm just going to save and close. So I just set up that item. I'm getting some messages up at the top here because we set the quantity that we have available at 0 and we set the reorder point at 1. So we're getting some notification that we're out of stock and also that it's low on stock. Sort of redundant because both are true. And if we scroll down, we'll see that Mookie the Beagle Bon Appetit, you can see it's not in the service category, but rather in the inventory category. So when we set up that inventory item, we indicated 3 accounts that we haven't used previously: the inventory asset account, the cost of goods sold expense account, and then the sales of product income, which is a revenue or income account. So because those are new accounts that we haven't properly set up in our system, we're going to go to the chart of accounts and add some account numbers for each of them. So in the search up top here, I'm just going to type chart of accounts, and I found it. So here I got the chart of accounts, and I'm trying to find those 3 specific accounts. So I'm just going to filter by their names. I'm going to type inventory first. There's inventory asset. I'm going to click on this drop down here and edit it. And the account number that we're going to give inventory asset is 1,300. It's in the 1,000s because it's in the asset category. Next, I'm going to pull up the sales of product income account. And just typing that name up into the filter here, and I found it. And I'm going to click on the drop down and edit it as well. And the account number for this account is 4,300. It's in the 4,000s because that's how this business has designated that number range for all of the income or revenue accounts. And we'll save that one. Next, I'm going to filter for the cost of goods sold account. I found it. Click on the arrow, edit it. We're going to give this one an account number of 5,000. Save that. And then finally, we're going to filter for an account called purchases. And found that one as well. Click on the arrow, edit it. And we've got an account number of 5,050 for purchases. And we'll save that. And that's all we need to do in our chart of accounts for today, is set up those inventory related accounts. Now we're going to start working through a typical workflow on the vendor side with inventory. So if I mouse over create, look at my vendor column, we're going to be working through this workflow. We're going to record purchase orders where we've ordered goods from our vendor but we haven't received them yet. That doesn't create a journal entry. It doesn't cause a change to any account balances. And we wait until we receive the inventory, and then that purchase order becomes a bill at that point, and maybe for lesser quantities or different quantities than ordered depending on what the vendor sent. And then finally we'll record the pay bill transaction where we're paying off the account payable that was created in the bill. So we're going to start off with the purchase order. So I moused over create, in the vendor column select purchase order, and we are buying some dog food from our vendor. So if I click on the drop down for the vendor, I can find that vendor we added, only the best dog food. You can see our business address populated here for the shipping address. When we entered the vendor, we did not put in their mailing address, so we don't have that in there. And the purchase order date, so per the text, this is on January 2nd. So I'm seeing a problem with this purchase order in that we don't have a section where we can indicate what items we purchased. If I click on the drop down for category, that's going to show all the different accounts in the chart of accounts that might be applicable to the transaction, but it doesn't show the items in our products and service list. So I think I need to make a settings change here. So I think I'm just going to close out of this screen for now. We haven't entered much other than the vendor name and the date, and I'm not going to save it. I'm just going to come back to it in a minute. So I'm going to close this out. Do I want to leave without saving? Yes. And what I'm going to do is go back into our settings and accountant settings, and then I'm going to select the expense tab here. And let's see, use purchase orders is turned to on. Then I'm going to, that's how it's supposed to be. So I'm going to toggle it off for a minute and then save and then toggle it back on and save again. Okay, it's turned back on. So I'm going to see if it took care of it. So I'm going back to create in the vendor column, selecting purchase order, and yes, now I'm seeing a section for item details down below, so it appears that it worked. I considered editing this part of the video out, but I think it's good to show that I have problems sometimes too when I'm using software. So if it hadn't worked after trying it the second time, my next step would have been to delete my temporary internet files and then relogging into QuickBooks and trying it again. But for some reason I had a little glitch there, and you might too, so I left it in the video. All right, so once again, we're going to select the vendor here, only the best dog food, enter the date, this is January 2nd. I'm verifying that the purchase order status should be open. When you create a new order, it should default to that. And let's see, so in the item details section, I need to expand that. So I'm going to click on this little arrow, and now I can select the item from our products and service list that we're ordering today. You can see that the description and the rate auto-filled. And let's see, are we buying a quantity of one? No, we're not. We're buying 4 of them. So I'm going to update that and then click out of that box, and you can see the amount auto-calculated. If we bought more than one item, we could go down to line 2 and indicate it as well, but we didn't today. If we had special instructions or note to pass to the vendor, we could enter it here. If we had an image or a PDF for the order, we could attach it if we'd like. For right now, though, we are just going to save the transaction. And you might think I'm going to click on more and look for transaction journal. Well, I did, but there's no transaction journal. And the reason why is because a purchase order is a non-posting event. It does not cause a journal entry to be created. There is no increase in inventory asset. There's no increase in accounts payable because we just ordered the items today. We haven't, the items haven't shipped. We haven't received them. So there's no accounts payable to increase yet. So now I'm just going to close out of the purchase order screen since I already saved it. And now I'm going to work through the second step of the workflow, creating a bill. So mouse over create, select bill, and from the list of vendors, we're going to select that same vendor, only the best dog food. And look what happened when we selected that vendor. We've got a little pane that opened off to the side here, and it's our purchase order. And we are going to be adding that to this bill. So I am going to click on add and look at what happened. The item details populated with the information from that order. Now I'm going to revisit this in just a second because we had to look at the quantity that we received, but I just want to make sure I get all the terms and the dates and all that detail in the system. So it looks like the bill date is the 3rd, so we received the goods on the next date, and then the terms were net 30. So then the due dates determined based on the bill date and the terms, so 30 days after the 3rd of January is February 2. It looks good. Groundhog's Day. So then the bill that's received from the vendor would be compared against the purchase order at this point, and we would count quantity received at this receiving dock there, and we'd make adjustments here to the bill if we received a different quantity than what was ordered. But the text says that we received all the items ordered, so we're not going to make any changes there. The text does ask us to put in a brief memo, purchase of Mookie the Beagle Bon Appetit organic dog food, and now we're ready to save this transaction. Now this was a bill transaction, so this is a posting transaction. It will create an increase to our accounts payable as well as an increase to our inventory. We have received the inventory, so we have more inventory asset, and we owe our vendor because we haven't paid for this stuff yet, so we have an increase in the accounts payable as a result. So that's what we'll see when we go to more and then transaction journal. And sure enough, we see a credit to accounts payable. That's a liability account. Liabilities increase on their credit side. And then we see a debit to our inventory asset account, and that's an asset account, and debits cause those to increase as well. So our journal entry makes sense with our financial accounting knowledge, and we're ready to move on to the next step of our workflow, which is to pay this bill that we just entered into the system. So we're going to mouse over Create, under the vendor column, select Pay Bills. And because we just entered that bill, it's showing up in the list here. And now we're going to pay it. So the first thing is to consider is how are we paying for it? Well, we're not using the checking account today. Instead, we're paying with our Visa credit card. Apparently we wanted to earn those points. And the date of the payment is going to be on January 5th. I want to check the box next to this bill, verify the amount. This is the amount we are paying, and we are going to save the transaction. Now I'm going to close out of this pane. I'm going to pull up the search, give it a moment, and I should see the bill payment to Only the Best Dog Food. I'm going to click on that, and now I can click on More and see the transaction journal. And before we do that, we know that anytime we're in the bill payment screen, our accounts payable account is going to be decreasing. So we know that it will be debited because that's how you decrease liabilities, and then the account that we use for the payment is going to be indicated here. The text said we use the Visa credit card. Well, that's a liability to us as well. But if we use the Visa credit card to pay off the bill to Only the Dog Food, the balance of the Visa credit card is going to increase. So that's going to show up as a credit in the journal entry because liability accounts increase on their credit side. So I'm going to select Transaction Journal now and verify those details. Sure enough, our Visa credit card's credited, which is an increase, and our accounts payable liability account is debited, which is a decrease. So now that we've worked through a workflow related to the purchase of inventory with those three steps, purchase order, then entering a bill, and then paying that bill, now we're going to flip over to the customer side of inventory cycle here and we're going to record an invoice, a receipt of payment on an invoice, and then depending on how the customer paid, potentially a deposit to the bank. And before we do that though, we're going to set up the business for sales tax in the state of California. And to do that, I'm going to mouse over my apps and I have a section for sales tax. I'm going to select that. So to set up QBO for automated sales tax, we're going to click on the Get Started button. But before I do that, I just want to mention that our business in this example with Mookie the Beagle is based in California. And sales tax in California is a lot more complicated than here in Michigan. In Michigan, it's fairly straightforward. There's a flat 6% sales tax on most goods with a few exceptions like groceries or prescription drugs, things like that. California, on the other hand, uses a destination-based system. That means sales tax can vary depending on where the buyer is located within the state, not just the seller. On top of that, state rate, counties and cities can add their own local rates, which makes it much more complex. And just to know, sales tax got even more complicated nationwide after the Wayfair Supreme Court case in 2018. That decision allowed states to require out-of-state sellers, including online sellers, to collect and remit sales tax if they meet certain thresholds, economic thresholds. So depending on how and where you sell, you might have obligations in multiple states. Now, we're not going to dive into all those rules here. For our purposes, we'll just set up a simple sales tax in QuickBooks so you can see how the software handles it. So to do that, I'm going to click on Get Started. So we're being warned here before we get started that we need to have some information about the business before we can go through these steps. One of the things that's really important here is that you typically have to apply for a sales tax permit before you're allowed to collect and then remit the sales tax back to the government. So in Michigan, you have to do an application. You can do the application online, but you have to have that before you can start conducting these types of sales as a business. So we're just going to assume that we have that information for Mookie the Beagle and hit next. So we're seeing our business address here in Mountain View, California, and we got a little detail about the different tax rates that are applicable in that area. I'm going to hit next. So you can see that the agency that we remit the sales tax to is automatically listed there based on our address. And then the next step we have to select is our filing frequency for our sales tax returns. And these basically depend on the amount of taxable sales we have in the business. If we have a large number, then it's probably going to be monthly, a small number annually, and then places in between. We are going to select quarterly. And then next. And currently our business is not selling product to people from other states, so we are not going to have registered for sales tax with any other agency. So I'm going to leave that at a no and next. And then we sort of got a confirmation of what we did in the previous screens there. So we are going to finish and turn on sales tax. All right, so we got a confirmation screen, going to click done. And now on our sales tax overview screen, we can see the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration listed out, and we don't currently owe anything to them because we haven't recorded any taxable sales yet. That is about to change because now we're going to record our first taxable sale. So now we're working through the customer workflow here again. So mouse over create, just briefly talk about that. So we're going to be first recording an invoice. An invoice is used when we make credit sales to our customers. So this is going to indicate that the customer owes us, and it's going to create an increase in our accounts receivable. It's going to increase our revenues. And if we sell product, it's going to decrease the balance of the inventory asset, because if we sold product, we have less product. And it's also going to increase our cost of goods sold expense when we sell product. And then the follow-up to an invoice transaction where we bill the customer is hopefully receiving the payment from that customer later on. That'll decrease our accounts receivable, and typically it'll either increase our checking account or increase our payments to deposit account, depending on how the customer paid. If they paid in the form of cash or maybe a personal check, then we're typically going to go to the payments to deposit account, and that would cause us to need to have a third step in the process where we subsequently recorded a bank deposit, and that would increase the balance of our checking account and then decrease that payments to deposit account. I know that's a lot of information, but I sort of wanted to preview it because it's a workflow that we've touched on previously with the addition of inventory being involved now. So a couple more accounts are affected by that initial invoice. So I hit the invoice button there, and now we are going to put in our customer here, and we are selling to Joseph Asher for their pet Cal. So I'm going to select Cal. The address auto-populated. Our address is listed here, and we have some details here we're going to watch. So the invoice date is January 8th. The terms auto-filled at net 30, that is correct. And based on the invoice date and those terms, the due date was determined. Scrolling down the page a little bit, we've got the product or service that we're selling. We're selling them some dog food. So I'm going to look for that in my list. Mookie the Beagle, Bon Appetit, organic dog food right there. And we sold a quantity of 2. So I'm going to update that quantity. And then once I do that and click outside of that box, I can see the amount auto-calculated at $280. That looks great. Another little nifty thing here is if I mouse over a quantity in a sales invoice transaction like this, I can see the quantity that's currently on hand is 4, so we do have enough to fulfill this sales invoice, so that's good. And next, I'm going to check the box for the sales tax, and I can see that an auto calculation wasn't made, and I've got a little exclamation mark here. I believe that's because the laws in California have destination piece to them, and this address of this customer is in a different city and zip code than our business location. So I think we'd actually have a little bit of more setup to do because of the complexity here. But to sort of avoid that complexity, what the author does is not proper as far as like getting the correct amount of sales tax and remitting it to the government. So we would never actually do it this way, but just to sort of get past this piece because it's not a sales tax class. What we're going to do here in this drop down under select sales tax rate is we are going to add a custom rate. So under custom rates, I'm going to select add rate. So in the name, I'm going to type in custom rate. And for the agency, I'll select the California Tax Agency there, Department of Tax and Fee Administration. And then for the rate, we're just going to do a flat 9%. And then I'm going to hit the save button. And now I can see my custom rate is selected. So in future invoices, when we create them, we'll click on this drop down for the sales tax rate, and our custom rate is going to be there. We'll just select that each time just to sort of simplify the California tax rules. So we can see that 9% of the subtotal was calculated, and it looks like the math is correct. So we got this invoice total of $305.20. Make sure that yours matches that. Now I'm going to save the transaction. And once I've done that, now I can click on more actions and I can see the transaction journal. Now I created an invoice here. So this is always going to create an increase to our accounts receivable and an increase to our revenue. And in the case of a sale of inventory, it's also going to decrease the balance of the inventory asset and increase the balance of cost of goods sold expense. So we're going to see 4 accounts here. And that's exactly what we see. Debit to accounts receivable, which is an increase. This is the amount that the customer was charged. We also see an increase in our revenue. The reason why there's a difference in the amount is because of the sales tax. So actually it's 5 accounts in the journal entry, not 4, which I said a moment ago. And then the difference between the 305.20 and the 280 is the sales tax. And this is a liability to the business. We have an increase in our liabilities there because we owe the California state for the amount of sales tax that we collected from the customer. We have to remit that later on. And then finally, like I said, the inventory assets going to decrease, credits to assets decrease them, and then the expense called cost of goods sold is going to increase. Debits to expenses add to them. So our journal entry looks fine, a little bit more complicated when we have a sale of a product and that we have at least 4 accounts, and in this case 5 because of the sales tax. And also notice that the amount that is being taken out of inventory and put into cost of goods sold is different than the amount that was placed into the income account. This is what we charge the customer for the dog food, $280. The $100 is what that inventory cost us to buy from our supplier. So the difference between the 280 and the 100, that's known as our gross margin or gross profit. So now that we've recorded an invoice transaction in the customer workflow here, now we're going to look in the customer column under the create button and look at the next step, receive payment on the invoice. So you can't use the receive payment screen unless you've already previously recorded an invoice. So I'm going to choose that customer that we just sold product to, which was Joseph Asher. It was their pet Cal, so I'm going to select the Cal project. And now that I've done that, I see all the invoices that are outstanding from Cal. So they owe us for 3 different invoices, and the one that we're collecting on today is the one that we just entered, so the 305.20. But before I get down there and handle that, I want to make sure the details up top are correct. So the date that we're receiving payment is actually January 10th. We do not have a reference number. The payment method, they're paying us with a credit card. And because they're paying with a credit card, we are not going to deposit to payments to deposit. We'd use that if they paid in the form of cash or a personal check typically, but instead, because they paid us with a credit card, the funds are going to be automatically placed into our checking accounts. So I need to select 1001 checking. So now I'm down here. We are receiving on the invoice that we just created, which is this invoice for $305.20. I'm going to check the box next to that. Once I did that, the amount received populates up here. We are receiving that full amount from the customer, so we are good to go. And we were not offering them any discount terms, so they're not getting us a discount for paying early or anything like that. So now that that detail is in there, I'm going to hit the record button. And once I hit record, the more button appears and I can take a look at the transaction journal. Now, anytime we're on the receive payment screen, our accounts receivable is going to decrease. And we'll see that in the journal here. And there it is. So we see a credit to accounts receivable. That's an asset account. So credits cause them to decrease. The customer owes us less. That's what that's saying. And then because the customer paid us using their credit card, immediately the funds were placed into our checking account. That's an asset account. It's increasing. We have more money in our checking account. Now, if the customer had paid in the form of a personal check or with cash, then we'll probably see payments to deposit here. That's also an asset account and it's also increasing. So we'd see a debit to it. But then we'd have a subsequent step in our workflow where we'd have to deposit those funds. So we'd take away from payments to deposit and increase checking in that extra workflow. We'd record a bank deposit. But in this case, the customer paid with a credit card, so we got the money already. There is no third step in the process here. In section 710 of our textbook, they discuss briefly the concepts of internal control applied to inventory. They bring up some good points, but the concept isn't covered very thoroughly here. So in the discussion for this week, I'm going to have you dive a little deeper into this and talk about QBO and inventory control. So read through this section, and then when you get to the end of this chapter and you've done the activities in both Mookie and Hafra Cyber, then I want you to get into discussion board and respond to my prompt, and that's what it's going to be about, is talking about inventory control in QuickBooks. All right, so now I'm moving on into the section of our textbook labeled Mookie Exercises 7. And the first thing that we're going to do is a bunch of data entry into the products and services list. We're going to add several new inventory items. And I'm going to show you how to do that manually. We already did it with one. I'm going to show you on the first maybe one or two here. And then I'm going to show you a way to automate that if you'd like. You could manually enter all of them if you want, or if you'd like, you can use ChatGPT and a little computer vision to speed up that process, and I'll show you that as well. So to get back to that products and services list, we go up in the search box, or we can click the gear icon and find it under lists. I'm going to go that way this time. And there's our list, and we're going to be creating a bunch of new inventory items. So I'm hitting the new button and select inventory item. Once again, inventory items are things that you sell where you track quantities. Non-inventory items are things that you sell where you don't track quantities, but we're going to be tracking quantities on all of these things today. All right, so the book has this table. I'll put it on screen a minute here. So this is the table that we're using to enter this inventory information. We also have these other pieces of information that we have to consider and set up for each of these items about which accounts are associated with the item, as well as quantities on hand to begin with, and so on. So we'll be going through this detail as we work through this first example. And it looks like the first thing we're going to be putting in is a hammock small. So Mookie the Beagle hammock small is the name of the first item. So I've entered the name. The item type should be inventory item. The SKU, we don't have one. The category, we're going to put this into a new category per that table in the book. It looks like it's going to be called pet hammocks. Type that name in there, hit save. Now I'm showing that category appearing on the screen. The quantity on hand for all of these to begin with is going to be 0, and the as of date for all of these items to begin with is going to be January 1st, 2025. The reorder point for each item is going to be set at 0. And the inventory asset account, the default should be correct, but make sure it says 1,300 inventory asset on your end. For the description in the sales section as well as in the purchasing section, we're just going to copy the name of the item and paste it in there. I'll just take care of those both at once. The price that we're charging per that table in the book is $600 for this hammock. And the income account that we map to this should be our 4,300 sales of product income. Looks like we're good there. And then in the purchasing section, we've got the description already in there. The purchase cost of these per the book is $180 each. The expense account that's mapped to this item is going to be the 5,000 cost of goods sold. Make sure that's selected as well. And then we don't have preferred vendors indicated for any of these items, so we are going to leave that blank. Now, if you're going to continue to manually enter these, you can save in new and go ahead and enter all the information for the next item. If you hit save and close, it'll save this one and it'll just close out of this pane. I'm going to hit save and close because I'm going to use computer vision and ChatGPT to enter the rest of these. So the first thing I want to do is I want to consider how I need to import the data into QBO. And if I'm on the product and services screen here and I click on the arrow next to new, I can see I can do a batch import of a CSV or an Excel file. So I'm going to select that. And let's see, I want to now select import CSV Excel, and here we go. So we're going to upload the file here, but before I do that, this is the important thing that I want to pay attention to, is what the CSV has to look like. So I'm going to download that sample CSV, and I'll open this up, and this is a reminder of what this file needs to look like. So this information here isn't too important. I'm just going to delete that out. What I'm really interested in here are these column headers of all these different columns within the sheet here. So basically this first row, I need to make sure that my CSV file has these column headers. So I'm going to copy that to my clipboard, and now I'm going to get into ChatGPT. As you can see here, I've logged into ChatGPT. I'm using a free account here. You can see that down here. And a free account has a limited number of times that you can use computer vision per day. So make sure that if you do this for both Mookie the Beagle and Hafra Cyber, that you're efficient with your use of it, because you might be cut off if you use it too many times during a particular day. You might have to do it on a different day, possibly. So I'm going to write a good prompt here first. So I've written a prompt using natural language. I am trying to import inventory items into the products and services list in QBO, and I want to create a CSV file that will help me do that. My CSV file has to have the following headers. So now I'm going to paste those headers that I copied from my Excel file, my CSV file. And also when I pasted it, put an image in there. I don't know if that image will affect my quota because I'm using a free account, so I'm going to hit this X next to the image just to get rid of it in case it does. And then I want to make sure that these column headers are delimited properly. So it looks like I probably want to add some commas. So the first one's product service name. I'm going to put a comma at the end of that. Category is the next one. Put a comma there. Item type's the next. Taxable is the next, and so on. SKU, sales description, sales price rate, income account, purchase description, purchase cost, expense account, quantity on hand, quantity as of date, reorder point, and the last one's inventory asset account. So I put those commas in there just so that ChatGPT can easily see the separation of these different headers. And I just was trying to save time by pasting the names in from my Excel file. So now I need to add a little bit more detail here because I need to tell it that I'm going to provide a screenshot. And also I have some information that applies to each inventory item with respect to the accounts that are associated with each one. So I want to go take a look at that text again and make sure that my prompt reflects that. So to make my prompt work here, I pulled up the text off to the side here, and basically I just sort of read out this information in my own words. So I added this to the prompt, and I had a bunch of space here. This was to help ChatGPT, but also to help you see what I did in the prompt there, just for a good example. So I wrote, I'm going to provide you with a screenshot of the different items that I want to import into QBO using my CSV file, and I have some other details that I want to mention right now. So for the inventory asset column, each of the items is going to be associated with the 1,300 inventory assets. So I'm getting that from here. Inventory asset count for all the items is that. And I put that in quotes just to make sure it got it exactly verbatim because it has to match our chart of accounts exactly like that. For the income account, each item will be associated with the 4,300 sales of product income account. Once again, put that in quotes so that it was exact. For the expense account, each item will be associated with the 5,000 cost of goods sold. Once again, coming from here. For the inventory quantity on hand, each item will be 0. It's right here. The as of date for each item will be January 1st, 2025, right there. The reorder point for each item will be 0. So we're almost ready to go. All we really need to do is take a screenshot of that page in our book. So I'll pull that page up a moment and make it full screen. And then we've got this table. Now we have already entered that first item, so I need to probably recognize that as well. But before I do that, I'm just going to take my screenshot. So in the search down here, you can pull up your snipping tool by typing that in. There it is. Hit the plus new button to take your screenshot. Make sure to get your column headers in there as well. So there is the screenshot within the snipping tool, and as soon as you use this snipping tool, whatever you took a screenshot of is in your clipboard on your computer, so now you can just paste it. So I'm going to go back into ChatGPT and do that. So I'm going to make sure my cursor is somewhere in this prompt here, and I'm just going to paste. There's that screenshot. And then one last thing to remember here is that we did manually enter that first inventory item, which was the small hammock. So I need to make a note in my prompt here if I don't want the CSV file to include that, because I'll get an error if I try to import the same item that already exists. And what I'll do here is just put a new sentence in here about that. So the first item in that table, the small hammock, has already been added to the products and services list, so don't include that one in the CSV file. So I think we're ready to go. I'm going to send my prompt. It's going to take a minute or two to generate, but I should have a working CSV file momentarily. Okay, so I got a response. It looks like I have a CSV file that I can download. I'm going to do that, and then it does indicate that it included all items in the table except that small hammock. Now I'm being prompted to save that CSV file, which I'll do. Yeah, so it didn't bring in the small hammock, but we're going to verify that. So we're going to take a look at this file a moment. And what I want to do here is be able to read everything. So I'm going to select all these columns, then I'm going to double click on the column header at the edge of one of the columns that was selected. It's going to auto fit the column widths to fit the contents, and we got a whole bunch of detail in here. So it looks like the small hammock was not included, which is what we want. And before we attempt to import this information into QBO, we want to verify the information is accurate in this CSV file. So we're going to go through and make sure these details. So the first thing, product and service name, that's the name column here. And we excluded the first one. So Mookie the Beagle Hammock Medium, Mookie the Beagle Hammock Large, E-Collar Cone. We want to make sure that they're in the same order so the checking of this detail becomes easier. Gauze bandages, sterile wipes, oral syringes, sterile latex gloves. Okay, that looks great. And then we've got our categories here, pet hammocks, pet wellness supplies. Now, the pet wellness supplies are a new category, and I believe the import will just create that category, but we'll verify that in a moment when we try it. And then let's see what else. We've got the type. These are all inventory items. Yep, that looks good. They're all taxable. That wasn't in our prompt, but that should be the assumption for each of these. They are all going to be taxable. So let's go with yes on that. And then the description is just going to match these items. Nope, actually not for all of them. We did give a little bit more detail on some of them in the table. So it looks like those details are matching and showing in the same order. The first one was omitted, and then we want to verify all these amounts. And remember, that first row is omitted because we already manually imported that. So 800,000, just make sure these amounts match and are in the same exact order. The 4,300 sales of product income account, that's exactly how we want that in there, is our income account. Looks good. Purchase description is just going to match up with the sales description, which it does. Now I'm going to scroll over and take a look at the remaining details. So the purchase cost is the cost. The first row is omitted, so just verifying the amounts match and are in the same exact order. The 5,000 cost of goods sold account is our expense account. That looks great. Quantity on hand for each of these is 0. quantity as of date is January 1st, 2025 for all of them. That's great. Reorder point 0. And then finally, the inventory asset account is 1,300 inventory asset for all of them. So it actually looks great. The only question I have about the importing here, because I'm sort of doing this on the fly, winging it right now, is whether that category is going to come in properly or not. So we'll see that in just a moment. So I just want to make sure that I save this. Well, actually I didn't change it other than change the column headers, but I guess I can save it, and then I'll close it out. And there's that sample we downloaded earlier. I'll close that out as well. Don't need to save that. All right, so now I'm ready to go back into QBO. All right, so I'm already to the import screen in QBO, and now we're ready to do it. We're going to upload our file. So we're going to browse for it. We find the location on the computer where that file's at. There's the QBO inventory import that I just downloaded from ChatGPT and looked at. I'm going to open that. I'm going to hit next. And what we're seeing here is a bunch of green check marks for all the different columns that we have in our file. So we've got the QuickBooks fields and then the fields that are in our CSV file, and they're all showing as they map properly. We've got green check marks. We're ready to go there. And now we're getting confirmation about the details here, and it's the same information that we looked at with the CSV. Now it did give me a little error here with the dates, so it looks like I might need to do something with these. So I'm not sure why. If I can go back, no, I can't. So it's probably the order in which the dates were listed. So I guess I'm going to manually put those in. I could have probably improved my prompt if I had thought about it a little bit more, but I'm just going to do that for each of these. So I manually put in those quantity as of dates for each item, and now I'm ready to do it. So I'm going to hit save, and here I'm getting an audit history. You can see that it's saving to QuickBooks. This take some time because we're uploading a file, so just give it a little bit of time. Okay, actually, it didn't really take as long as I thought it was going to, but it was still showing that it was saving and showing this little progress bar here. So what I did is I opened another tab up in my browser here, and I just went into the QBO login, and I pulled up the products and service list in the search by typing the word products, hitting enter, and then finding it here. And then here's my product and service list, and if I click on this type column, it'll put all the items in order by type. And let's do it one more time there. So I've got all the inventory items up top, and we added that pet food supplies earlier, and then that table we added one manually, but if I count all the items in the table, there were 3 items in the pet hammock category total. So I got those. I got the pet food supplies there, and then there were 6 items in the category of pet wellness supplies. So even though that pet wellness supplies category, we didn't manually create that before, the import allowed it to come in. So apparently I don't have to wait for this. I think they're maybe creating an audit log here that we can look at later, and that's why it's taken some time. So I don't really need this tab open anymore because the product and service list has been updated, and now we're ready to record transactions that use some of these products. So now we're going to continue with the Mookie exercises 7 and move down into EM72 and record the first transaction in this section. So we're going to go through the vendor cycle here, and with the vendor cycle with inventory, there's typically 3 steps. We saw this earlier. Typically the first step is purchase order. That's a non-posting screen. It doesn't impact any account balances, so there's no journal entry behind it. You've just ordered the goods, but you haven't been billed for them yet, so no account payable, no inventory to change. After the goods have been received, we'll be entering a bill into QBO. That's posting. It creates an increase in accounts payable as well as an increase in inventory, and then we'll be recording the follow-up pay bills where we decrease accounts payable and then indicate how we paid for that purchase, how we paid for that bill. So to start off here, we're going to be doing a purchase order. In fact, we're going to be doing 3 purchase orders in a row. All right, so the first purchase order here is going to be for a new vendor. So actually we're going to add that vendor to the system here. So from the drop down, choose a vendor. We're going to add new, and we're going to put in the details. The name of the vendor is Maddie's Marvels. So I've got the details entered for Maddie's Marvels there. I'm going to save the vendor record, and now I'm going to continue with the purchase order. So we got Maddie up here. Her address is showing. My address is showing. The purchase order date is January 18th. The details here, so it's not under category details because we're buying product. It's under item details, And let's see, what are we purchasing? We're purchasing several items. We're buying hammocks. So we're going to be first selecting the small hammock. So there it is. And then the quantity that we're purchasing is 2. And once I click out of that box, the amount auto calculates. And let's see, the next is the medium hammock. So I'll go down to line 2, find the medium hammock in the list. The quantity for that is 3, so update quantity, click out of the box, amount auto fills, and then finally we're buying some of the large hammocks. So go down to line 3, find the large hammock. The quantity for that is just 1, and we get this grand total here for this purchase order. We don't have any attachments, so we are going to just save. The More button does not show a transaction journal because purchase orders don't create journal entries. They are non-posting. So now I am going to record another purchase order from another vendor. So I'm going to close out of this one and go to Create, find Purchase Order in the Vendor column, and look at the details in the book. So this is going to involve another new vendor. So from the drop down here, I'm going to add new, and this one is called Napoleon Pet Supply. So I got the details for Napoleon's Pet Supply entered into the system. I'm going to save their vendor record and proceed with the purchase order. So once again, we're purchasing inventory items. So we're not going to the category details, we're going to the item details. And it looks like we are buying 6 different items here. So we're going to have 6 different rows entered. The first one is the e-collar cone. So select that, the quantity is 1. The next one is the activated charcoal. Where are we at there? There it is. The quantity for this is 5. Click there. In the quantity box, click outside of it. The amount auto calculates. Moving on to the third line, we've got gauze bandages. So gauze bandages. That's sort of interesting because gauze bandages, I guess we're going to track them individually and track quantities. A lot of times that might be something that we would put as a non-inventory item because we sell it, but we don't necessarily keep that close of an eye on quantity. But I guess this business does, so we're rolling with that. We're putting in quantity there, and the amount should auto-calculate, and it did. The next one, sterile wipes. Find that in our list. The quantity there is 6. Click out of that, verify that the amount auto-calculated. It did. And the next one's oral syringes. Found it. Quantity there is 2. Click out of that box, make sure the amount auto-calculated. It did. And then finally, the last one is the sterile latex gloves. And the quantity there is 6. Update that, click out of the box, the amount auto calculated, and we've got a grand total here. Make sure yours matches mine and save. And once again, More does not show a journal entry for a purchase order because purchase orders are non-posting. Closing out of the purchase order, and I think we have one more to enter. So we are going to do that, but for this one, it's for that only the best dog food, and we actually didn't add their address earlier, and they ask us to do that now. So to get there, where I can add their address, I need to actually get outside of the purchase order to do that because we've already entered them into the system, so I can edit them there. So I'm going to mouse over my apps, go to expenses and bills, and there I'll see vendors. Got my vendor list here, finding only the best dog food, click on their name, and up top here I'm going to click on the edit button, and then I can put in the phone number and the address per the book. So now I got the phone number and the address in there for only the best dog food. I'm going to save their vendor record, and now I'm going to create a purchase order with them. So I'm going to mouse over create, in the vendor column select purchase order. I'm going to select only the best dog food as our vendor. See their address is populated, so did ours. The date of this purchase order is January 18th. That's already set. We're buying inventory items, so going down to item details, and it looks like it's just a one-liner here. We're buying that dog food, so I select that, and then the quantity that we're purchasing is 10. Click out of that, see the amount auto-calculated, and then I'm going to save. And then one last time, purchase orders don't create journal entries, so I click on More, and I don't see transaction journal. It's because it's a non-posting event. close out of the purchase order, and ready to move on to the next step in the inventory purchase process, and that's going to be recording bills related to these purchase orders, because now we've assuming that we've received these items. So to do that, mouse over create, in the vendor column select bill. The first bill is coming from Maddie's Marvels, so we're going to select them from the vendor list here, Maddie's Marvels, and there it is. And as soon as I selected that vendor, the system recognized, hey, there's an open purchase order there, and we are going to add it. And then we can adjust quantities if we did not receive all the items that we had ordered, but it does not indicate that that is the case, so we are just going to roll with this. Hit save. The more button for a bill does have a transaction journal. Every time you enter a bill, it's going to increase accounts payable, so we're going to look for that. There we have it. Increase to our accounts payable is a credit to accounts payable. That's there. And then we also have 3 debits to our inventory asset account, and those are for the 3 different items that we had that we purchased from Maddie. So we're ready to rock and roll and move on to our next bill. So our next bill is from Napoleon Pet Supply, and to create it, we mouse over create, in the vendor column select bill. And then for the vendor, we select that name of that business, Napoleon Pet Supply. As soon as we did that, this drawer opened up with that open purchase order. We're going to add it to the bill. It's going to bring over those quantities and those items and those details of what we purchased. The receiving team would compare the items received against the purchase order here, and we'd adjust the quantities if needed. I should verify the date. And I don't know that I did that on the actually on the last one. I think I omitted it, so I probably should go and revise that date. For the sake of the video, I'm not going to, but make sure you're always checking your dates. I made a common mistake there with that last one, and I don't think I updated the date properly. So for this one, it's the 23rd of January, so make sure that I did that there. And all right, so the book does not say we received any different quantities than what was ordered, so I believe we're ready to save the transaction. And once again, a bill is going to always create an increase in accounts payable for this total, and then it will, since we're buying inventory items, we'll have increases or debits to our inventory 6 times, because there were 6 different line items in this bill here. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to pull up the journal entry, but it's always good to connect your prior accounting knowledge to these screens so that you fully understand what it is that we're doing. So I'm going to close this one out, and we've got one more bill to enter, and I'll mouse over create, in the vendor column find the bill, and then this one is for only the best dog food. So I'm going to find that in our list and make sure the bill date is good. It's the 23rd on this one as well. Once I selected the vendor, the open purchase order appeared on screen. I'm going to add it, and it looks like we did receive all 10 quantity of the dog food, so we're not going to adjust that. And then we're going to save this bill and close it out. And then if I wanted to get back to that transaction that I believe that I didn't record the date properly on, what I could do is remember that vendor name. There's many different ways to get there. I could pull it through the general ledger or other reports, but I'm just going to go to that vendor's records. So let's see, that was with Maddie's Marvels. So if I mouse over my apps, go to expenses and bills, go to vendors, and if I find Maddie's Marvels in the list there they are. Okay, yep, so here's the transactions list. Here are the transactions that we recorded. So the purchase order was the 18th, but per the book, the bill was not. It was the 21st of January. So I pulled up that bill, and I can just easily change the date here. So I'll change it to 21st and save it. It's getting confirmation. Hey, you sure you want to do that? Yeah, I do. All right, so that date is now corrected for my earlier omission there. So I'm going to close out of the bill. And now we're moving into the next step in the purchase of inventory process, where we pay these bills off. And rather than pay all 3 bills, the book just has us paying one of them. So it's just the bill to Actually, no, I misspoke. We are paying two of them. We're paying Maddie's Marvels and Only the Best Dog Food. So we are going to do that now. So I'm going to mouse over Create, go to Pay Bills, and we can see all three bills that we just entered. It's showing as overdue because it's looking at my computer's date, which is in August 2025, but the book is assuming that we're in January, so that's why it's showing they're way past due. They're not in our hypothetical world here. And the bills that we're paying off are to Maddie's Marvels as well as Only the Best Dog Food, so I'm selecting both of those. The payment date is January 24th, I believe. Yep, 24th. The payment account, we're paying from our checking account here. And let's see what else. So it's saying starting check number, so two checks are going to be created into the system to pay each of these bills. And from the drop down here, I am going to select save and close. And then what I can do now is come up here to the search, and I should see the two bill payments that were just created. So bill payment 6 and 7. If I wanted to, I can click on any one of them. You can see a check number was put in for bill number 6. Number 7 would have check number 7. And then if I want to see the journal entry, I can hit more, transaction journal. Now, anytime you're on pay bills, you're always going to have a decrease to your accounts payable. So that's going to be a debit to accounts payable. And then the credit's going to reflect how you paid for it. In this case, we paid with our checking account. So our checking account is going to decrease. That's an asset, so it'll be on the credit side. And that's what we'll see when we look at the journal entry. All right, there it is. So a debit or decrease to accounts payable and a credit or decrease to the checking account. We're on track. So now that we've had some practice with vendor related transactions with purchase of inventory, now we're going to move on to customer related transactions. We're going to be creating some invoices, and then we are going to receive payment from one of those invoices, and then we are also going to give a refund receipt for one of the transactions as well. And then we'll follow that up with doing a general ledger report and check our check figures against that. All right, so the first invoice that we're going to create is going to be for Joseph Asher and their pet Cal. So we're going to mouse over create. In the customers column, we're going to create an invoice. So from our customer list, we're going to select the customer. It's Joseph Asher and their pet Cal. So I'm going to select Cal as the customer for that project, that pet. And their addresses have auto-filled as well as ours. And let's see, we've got the date of the invoice, so it's January 25th. And it looks like they're just purchasing one item from us. So in the products and services area, I'm going to find it, and it's a medium hammock. So there it is. And then the quantity purchased is 1, so we're good there. The box is checked for this item being taxable, which it should. If yours isn't checked, then check it. Down here for the sales tax, where it says automatic calculation, we're going to click on that, and we are going to select our custom rate. And there we see the 9% rate applied to $800 correctly, so that looks good. And we're ready to save the transaction. So I'm going to save, and now I'm going to click on more actions and then transaction journal, and I should see the journal entry behind the screen of an invoice. Now anytime we record an invoice, it's always going to involve an increase in our account receivable and an increase in our sales revenue. And we see that here. There's the account receivable for 872. There's the sales revenue increasing for 800, the difference being the sales tax that is payable to the government. So this is a liability account. It's increasing because we owe the state of California $72 for this tax that we've collected from the customer. Also, because we're selling a product here, we have another portion of our journal entry. This is the cost side of the entry. So the 800 is what we charge the customer for the medium hammock, but we didn't pay 800 when we bought that hammock from our supplier. This is what we paid, $320, is reflected in both the inventory asset and the cost of goods sold. The inventory asset is credited because that's decreasing. We have less inventory because we sold it. And then cost of goods sold is an example of an expense account. Our expenses are increasing to show that we've used the asset, the inventory asset, and earned revenue from it. The difference between the $800 selling price and the $320 expense here is $480. That's our gross margin, our markup, our profit on this good. All right, so now that we've recorded the invoice to Cal, we're going to move on and we're going to record one more invoice. So to do that, once again, mouse over create, in your customers area, select invoice. All right, this invoice is to you. So you got to find your name in the list. So there's my name, and then I want to select my pet, which is Ozzy. And apparently you also have a pet named Ozzy, so select that under your name. All right, so now we're going to put in the date, and this invoice is on the 26th of January, and now we're going to indicate which items were purchased. So it looks like this is a lengthy one, so there's 8 different items with varying quantities. Rather than listen to me enter them, just follow along at the book with the details there. I'm going to do the first one here, and then you can just do the rest. So the first item in the list in the book was the hammock medium, so I'm just finding that, and the quantity was 1, so I don't need to change anything. And just continue that for the next line item. So go down to 2 and find it, and basically there should be 8 line items for this one. All right, so I've put all those items that we're invoicing Ozzy for, as well as updated the quantities. Make sure that your amounts are matching up with mine. Also, each of the items that are products that we're selling, the tax checkbox should be checked for those. So that's everything through the latex gloves, but the errand and the medium wellness were services, and those are not taxable in the state of California, so those are unchecked. You should have the same subtotal as I have. Now for the sales tax calculation on the products, we need to fix that because the system's doing an automatic calculation. We want to use our custom rate. So we click on that drop down, find the custom rate of 9%, and give the system a moment to do the calculation, and we can see this invoice total, and yours should match up with mine. We can hit save. And then if we wanted, we could take a look at the journal entry. It's going to be a really long one because of all these different line items of inventory, but basically it follows the same pattern. We're going to increase accounts receivable. We're going to increase income. We're going to increase sales tax payable. That's all going to be on the revenue side of the transaction for the accounts receivable for the total, including revenue plus sales tax. The revenue would just be the selling price, so the total before tax, 1,728. And then the sales tax payable for the sales tax amount is going to be increased. And then on the expense side, on the cost side of it, you're going to have a whole bunch of debits to your cost of goods sold expense account because you're increasing that, and a whole bunch of credits to your inventory asset account because you have less inventory because you sold it. And that'll be for a lesser amount than the revenue because we're making a margin. But for time's sake, I'm not going to look at that entry. I'm just going to close out of the screen. All right, so it looks like we have one more invoice to enter. So once again, mouse over create, and the customers column, select invoice. This one is for the customer Carlos Hafra, so click on this drop down, find Hafra, and then find their pet Bella and select Bella. All right, so this one actually had a pane open up here, and this calls back a transaction that we recorded much earlier in the class where we had some billable expense. We had a transaction we recorded where it was billable to a specific customer because we used some supplies for that customer. So once we selected that, this appears, and we are going to, I believe, add it in. Let me look at the notes. Actually, we're not. I don't know why we're not billing them for this right now, but the text doesn't indicate it. And I looked ahead and it looks like we do that in chapter 8. So for right now, I'm just going to close out this pane because I'm not adding this billable expense to this particular invoice. And I'm just going to close out of that box. I don't want to hide the suggested transactions. So actually, I'm going to say no, show them. All right, so let's see, because I want that prompt every time this sort of appears that, hey, that's a helpful prompt, I think. All right, so now looking at the details of this transaction. The date of the invoice is the 28th of January, and it looks like there's going to be 4 line items on the invoice, 4 different products that we're invoicing them for. Actually, nope, 2 products and 2 services. So the first product is going to be that hammock large, so I'm going to find that. It looks like that pane opened up again because it still wants me to bill them for that. I'm not going to though. The quantity for the hammock large is 1. The next thing they purchased was the dog food, so I'm going to find that. There it is. Quantity there's 2. And what else? We've got the services now. So we've got the errand with a quantity of 1, and then the fourth and final is a short visit. So find that, and the quantity for that is 2. For the 2 products in the system, we need to make sure that the item is indicated as taxable. So it didn't do that for the dog food, and I think that's because the text didn't have us do that originally. But I'm going to check that box so that by default the product should have the tax box checkmarked, and now they do. And then the services should not. So neither one, the errand nor the short visit, are taxable under the laws of California there. And we got this subtotal here, so make sure that yours matches up with mine. And then from the drop down for the sales tax rate, we're going to select that custom rate, give it a moment to calculate. There it is. And then we got this invoice total. Make sure that matches up with mine. And once again, we're not billing them for these billable expenses yet. All right, so now we're going to save the transaction, and if you wanted, we could look at the journal entry, but we've done that a whole bunch, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to close it out. All right, we've got 2 more transactions to record. So now that we've recorded the invoice transaction on the customer side of the process, we are going to receive payment on one of these invoices. So mouse over create, in the customers column, select receive payment. And we're receiving payment from Carlos Hafra related to their pet Bella, so select Bella. And we can see the outstanding invoices from Carlos Hafra here down below. We'll visit that in a moment. So the payment date on this one's January 30th. Select that. The payment method is credit card. And because he's paying with his credit card, the funds are going to be automatically placed in our checking account, so we're depositing to the checking account. If he had paid in terms of cash or personal check, then we would have selected the payments to deposit account, which would have added another step to our workflow, because then we would have had to record the bank deposit later. But because he paid with credit card, it's going directly to checking. All right, so now we're selecting the invoice that we're collecting on, and it says the one that we just entered. So the one that we just entered was dated the 28th. So I see it here, and I'm going to check that box there, and the amount populates here and here now that I've checked that box. And now I'm going to hit record, and once I've done that, I can pull up the more button and look at the transaction journal. Now, because we're on the receive payment screen, we know that that will always result in a decrease or credit to our accounts receivable account. The customer owes us less because they've paid us, and then it will also increase maybe our checking account if they paid us in a way that we get immediate access to our funds, or if they paid in the form of cash or a personal check, then it, whatever account we select here, it might be payments to deposit as part of the journal entry, or it might be checking depending on how they paid. So once again, more, and then transaction journal, and I'll see those facts reflected here. And there they are. A decrease to account receivable is done through the credit side, and an increase to the checking asset is done on the debit side. All right, so now we're moving on to the final transaction. It actually relates to this payment that we just received. So apparently there was an issue with the delivery of the dog food order, and Carlos only got 1 bag instead of 2 that were ordered. So what we're going to do now is give him a refund because he's already paid us. So we're going to do a refund receipt now. So to do that, we're going to mouse over create, and under customers, we're going to select refund receipt. We're going to select from the list Carlos Hafra's pet Bella. The date of this transaction is January 31st. And let's see, the payment method, I guess we're cutting him a check, so we're going to select that. And because we selected that, we're going to select the refund from our checking account here. And let's see, the product and service was the dog food, so select that. Quantity, he ordered 2 but only got 1, so we'll leave that at 1. And for the tax here, we are going to check the box because the system wasn't set up for the organic dog food to automatically check that box. We need to. And then down here for the rate, we want to make sure the custom rate is what we're refunding. So we see that. And then your facts should match up with mine as far as amounts go there. So make sure your subtotal, your tax, and your total match. And then we can hit save. And the refund was issued successfully. And then if we think about how this is going to impact things, well, this is going to reduce the balance of our checking account because we said we were refunding checking, so a credit to that asset is going to decrease it. And then it's also going to reduce revenue. We didn't earn as much because we gave him a refund. And I'm going to hit more and then transaction journal, and I should see that reflected. And actually, I see something interesting here. I'll talk about that in a moment. So just like we had thought, we're going to see a decrease to the checking account. That's done with the credit since it's an asset. We're also going to see a decrease to our income account. That's done with a debit, so that looks correct. And then we also see a decrease to the sales tax payable, and that's done with a debit because it's a liability account, so that looks good. Now, the thing that I find interesting here is that we also show an increase to the inventory asset and a decrease to the cost of goods sold. And that makes sense. If the customer actually returned the goods back to us, then we'd have more inventory, and since we have the inventory back, we have to reduce our expense. But the thing is, in the narrative, in the text, it doesn't indicate that that was the case. It just says that Heifer only received one bag of dog food instead of the two that were ordered. So apparently the assumption by the author was that we didn't actually ship out what we said we had earlier, and so we had subtracted too much from our inventory originally and added too much to cost of goods sold, I guess. So that's sort of interesting because it sounded like they sort of were lost in transit to me from the narrative, and I wouldn't assume that. But I checked against the check figures. That's the assumption. So we're just going to roll with that. But that's sort of an interesting feature of this event in the book. So I pulled up that refund receipt form here just briefly again, and I wanted to take a look if there was a way on the form that we could indicate that we didn't receive the inventory back. We're not assuming that for this transaction, but just in future, I thought that that would be something that we might want to take a look at. And what I found is that it's not on this form, so there's no way to do it. So this form is designed to automatically add back to inventory and subtract from cost of goods sold, as well as take away from revenue and show how the refund was given. So in this case, take away from our checking account. But it's automatically going to add to the inventory. And if we had a situation where that wasn't the case, what I found is what we could do is a credit memo instead, and then we could do the refund from there. Or we could also record this as a refund receipt and go inside our inventory and do an inventory quantity adjustment and handle it there. So not anything that we need to do here, but just sort of an aside to think about. All right, so the last thing we're going to do with Mookie is we're going to run a general ledger report. So go to reports, custom reports if you saved that one from my previous videos. Otherwise, go to standard reports and find your general ledger. The custom report that I did has all dates in it because students make date errors commonly. If you don't show all dates on yours, I suggest that you do come up top here, select all dates, hit run report, and then basically scan your dates and make sure that everything's in January of 25. And if it's not, then you can click on the transaction and edit the date. So what we want to pay attention to here are these details. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So we've got the details for the checking here and then the total, and this matches my key. So if yours doesn't, pay close attention to these details and try to figure out why not. I'm going to scroll down the page and see. So we're looking at the account balances in bold here, so the total for the money market, the total for checking, and so on. And so far we're good there. So we got inventory here, quite a few transactions impacting that one. The check figure matches, so it looks like I'm good. Payments to deposit, zeroed out, and so on. So I'm just checking all these figures, and you can do the same with yours. Pause the video if needed to see the details if they don't match. Sales tax looking good. Everything's looking good. Yep, perfect. All right, that was a little lengthier than I wanted it to be, but we covered a lot of material. And now that you've take a look at how to handle inventory transactions with Mookie the Beagle, now it's your turn to try it with Hafra Cyber. When you get to that step where you have to import the when you get to that step where you have to update your products and services list, it's up to you whether you manually import those items or if you want to do the ChatGPT vision trick. Again, you can do that as well and upload a CSV file into the system. If you have any questions or if you need any help whatsoever, don't hesitate to ask. I'm getting paid for this, guys. It's my job. I want you to ask questions when you're stuck. Reach out if you need me.